First tonight, a subject we haven't yet touched on here at 6 p.m, drugs, usually dangerous and almost always destructive. So why are there people out there who would want to make them legal or at least decriminalise them? Well, today, one of this country's most senior prosecutors, a man who's dedicated his life to throwing criminals and thugs of all varieties and sizes into jail, made it patently clear that he reckons some use of drugs, even peddling small amounts of them, should not, as he puts it, be criminal matters. Some might say a radical view from a man sworn to uphold the law.
Drug laws need to be reformed so that minor possession, use and trafficking are no longer treated as criminal matters, but are treated as the health and social issues that they are. Yes, people who are involved in that activity, manufacturing, growing, distributing drugs for profit, should continue to be dealt with as criminals. But if we do it sensibly and wisely, the profit motive can be reduced progressively over time, and there will be less of those cases that my office will need to worry about.
Nicholas Cowdery, the soon-to-retire New South Wales Director of Public Prosecutions, earlier today. He believes some current drug policies are ineffective, wasteful and don't consider basic human rights. As we said, pretty radical stuff. And there are those who agree with him. A short time ago, I spoke here in the studio with Tony Trimmingham, who set up a support network for addicts and their families after his own son died of a heroin overdose. Tony, you were telling me that it's almost 14 years exactly since you lost Damien.
Yes, 14 years last Thursday. And it doesn't get any easier, George. It's interesting, that day sometimes it slips by and I hardly notice it, and sometimes I'm very conscious of it.
Yeah, I noticed you were quoted as saying that time heals, people say, but that's crap, things actually get worse. But you do have to reach a point where you get on with your life.
You get on with your life
because
you know that's what they'd want you to do.
Yeah.
And of course you have to get on with it, but it never goes away. It's with you for the rest of your life. And of course, with illicit drugs in Australia, you know, we've had the tragedy of Christchurch and Bali bombs and things like that, but every year in Australia we've got the equivalent of 2 Christchurches.
Hadn't realised it.
Yeah, about 400 to 500 people lose their lives, mostly young people.
Today, Nicholas Cowdery, the New South Wales Director of Public Prosecutions, has said some things I'd like your reaction to, because if we're talking about getting that number down, obviously, I wonder whether you think what he's suggesting would do that. He has said that the drug laws need to be reformed so that minor possession, we need to know what he means by that, use and trafficking are no longer treated as criminal matters. In other words, he's saying those sort of things, minor possession of drugs, use of drugs, trafficking of drugs, should not be criminal offences. They should be decriminalised.
Well, when you think about it, it's common sense, George. 6 months after Damien died, I wrote a letter to the Sydney Morning Herald and I talked about Damien and I said we have to do things differently. And 14 years later, we're still pretty well doing them the same way. Yeah. And the last thing that families need when they're dealing with all the trauma of drug and alcohol use is criminal sanctions as well.
Yeah. Even for trafficking, you
trafficking
agree with...
is a different matter. I think any crime, we have to look at it in a different light. But even in those situations, I'd prefer to see people diverted if it's to feed a drug habit. But for pure possession and use, I think it should be where it belongs in the health and social arena. Yeah,
you think it gets muddied, if you like, the waters, the whole on the drug question, by the fact that it is a crime.
If it's a minor episode and they get put in jail, they're often on the road to being a more major criminal, and it doesn't do anybody any good to put them in prison.
Tony, what do you say? I have to ask you this. What do you say to the naysayers who are out there, for sure, who would listen to what you're saying, listen to what Nicholas Cowdery's saying, and say there's only one thing: zero tolerance is the only way to go about this problem?
Well, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and they are entitled to that opinion. But there hasn't been any evidence of it working anywhere in the world. You know, we've been fighting this so-called war on drugs for 40 years or more. Australia was once the leader. Back in the days of Bob Hawke and Neil Blewett, we led the world in harm minimisation and dealing with drug issues. We've slipped behind.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it there, but at least the debate is back on the table again.
I think that's the main thing. We need the debate.
Good to talk to you.
Thank you.